Welcome to the Hard Skills Podcast. I love it when I have a guest who just like gets into my music like I do. So welcome, Ina. So the Hard Skills Podcast is with me, Dr. Mira Branco. I work with leaders in healthcare, research, STEM, and other technical fields who want to develop an authentic leadership identity and create a healthy, inclusive workplace environment to retain the best people doing the best work. In other words, developing the hard skills needed to make greater impact. Welcome to our second season. This season, we are focusing on developing identity. This is the second stage of my strategic leadership pathway model. So that's why it's season 2. And we are talking with Ina Yulman about leading with emotional intelligence and strength, something that is hard to do when you're developing a leadership identity. Now, we value evidence-based practical solutions, so be ready, take notes, I always do, reflect deeply. She will make you reflect deeply, I promise, and identify at least one small step to further develop your hard skills muscle. Let me introduce a little bit about Ina. Ina Yulman is a relationship counselor based in New York City. Her journey to this role is a unique one, as she has experienced 2 distinct professional careers. She spent over 2 decades in the world of finance, including as an asset manager running a portfolio of over $1 billion to a product strategist for a large analytics platform. Her work spanned large corporations, investment funds, and even startups. After checking that career off the list, she got a master's degree in psychology from Harvard University and became a relationship counselor, using emotionally focused therapy, strength-based coaching, behavioral change methodologies, and somatic work to address body-mind stress. Her expertise includes healthy boundaries and effective communication for people in a variety of conventional and non-conventional relationship dynamics, including folks in ethical non-monogamous, ENM, polyamory, and LGBTQ+ relationships. So this is going to be a really interesting talk. Welcome, Ina. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I am beyond excited to be here with you. Thank you.
Yes, I am too. Remind us, how did we connect? I mean, I remember. Tell the audience, how did we get connected?
Sure. So I was involved in one of the startups, which was focusing on building emotional intelligence and for teenagers and making them more aware of what's going on. And I believe that you were friends with one of the co-founders, and it's been a remarkable discovery for me. I always enjoy our conversations.
Absolutely. And so we talk on kind of a regular basis and get like real deep into stuff. Like we don't have like normal conversations like other colleagues. So let's get into it. First of all, I'm sure people are sort of curious. How did you decide to transition from the hard charging world of finance to relationship counseling? That's kind of a strange leap, right? Maybe not.
I guess you can think of it as a strange leap, but in truth, I think that there are a lot more commonalities than people assume, and I'm going to expand on that. But also, the truth is, when I was in college, I had a dual major in psychology and economics, and also concentration in finance, because I am an immigrant kid and I need certainty. Basically, I had a long career, over 20 years in finance, and over time, it became clear to me that some of my talents and some of the values that I hold very dear are not being exercised in my career. So I thought long and hard. I am a bit risk averse, and basically, that's how I switched. And it's been really, really rewarding. what's interesting, and in order to connect the two professions, the two fields, I guess I'm, humbly, or maybe not humbly, I am pretty good at systems thinking, and both areas require understanding of, how things come to exist, what are some of the key aspects, and understanding those, you can really understand what are the drivers, whether it's macroeconomics or psychology.
And I think finance, there's an emotional and relationship when it comes to finance, relationship with money. They have a relationship with, like you said, financial stability. And you mentioned you're an immigrant. That's another commonality between us, right? We're both immigrants. What country did you immigrate from?
Well, so if you asked me a couple of years ago, I would say that I come from the Soviet Union, but today I say that I'm from Ukraine, which is the unfortunate shift driven by the political situation.
Yeah. So we had similar experiences in kind of country and politics, leading us to this immigration, experience, and completely get the combination of being interested in taking risks, the entrepreneurial nature of being an immigrant, as well as the need for financial certainty. So I just find that whole kind of aspect interesting. Okay, but not to digress, going back to like this connection of finance and relationship counseling, let's just start with some definitions of kind of what you do, right? We mentioned ENM, we mentioned polyamorous relationships. What is that for those who aren't familiar?
Oh, absolutely. And can I just dive back to what you said? I think that risk is a huge factor, both in finance and navigating relationships. And funnily enough, in the whole aspect of attachment theory, which is something I will discuss later, and this kind of like at the core of my practice is understanding how to take risks safely. And that's very, very interesting. And also risks are incredibly important to understand when you deal with uncertainty, right? How do you deal with risk when there's no certainty? So, but to answer your question about what I do, I deal with individuals and couples who are either in conventional monogamous relationships or non-monogamous relationships. And I help them deal with basically navigating some of the changes in the relationship, understanding what these changes mean for them, helping them to gain an insight on how to gain control in some of the issues that they're struggling with, how to let go of some of the things that they don't need to control, and also how to find themselves on the same side versus being oppositional.
Yeah. And so what are the kinds of complex risks or decision-making in relationships that are non-conventional, as we know, for example, for non-monogamy and for polyamorous relationships, what comes up for them?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of things that come up are very much related to to wanting to explore something new, wanting to try new things, and at the same time create safety around trying those new things, and at the same time for the partner to support and respect that desire without seeing it as a threat, right? And of course, I I don't know if I make it sound simple. It's not as simple. And that basically involves, to a large degree, creating trust, creating accountability, creating an understanding of what they can expect from each other, but at the same time, working with each person in the relationship in order to help them understand who they are, and help them get grounded. Because a lot of times people externalize their safety and they externalize their sense of self, right? And a lot of my work, both with monogamous and non-monogamous people, is to bring that safety and self-worth back.
Mm-hmm. And I would assume that boundary setting might also be part of that as well.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. Boundary setting is hugely important. I think boundaries are like a common word these days. I think boundaries both in understanding what makes you feel safe, right? And then we can have a long conversation about what kind of boundaries work, what kind of boundaries don't work, right? But it is also very much about understanding what your needs are, right? And being able to express them, right? Because a lot of times people confuse boundaries and needs as well, right? Where boundaries and rules. And then we can talk about that. And then something else that I feel is also very important to mention is that it's not just about boundaries, about understanding what doesn't work for you, but also kind of boundaries of who you are as a human being, so that you have a good perspective of, and I'm going to borrow your phrase, where you end and the other person begins, because a lot of times this is shifted in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. So, here's what I'm hearing so far as like part of what you think about in all relationships. They can be conventional or non-conventional. They could be personal or professional, in my opinion, right? Like it applies to all relationships, but establishing and creating trust, accountability, expectation setting and discussing what those are, safety, what it means for you, what it looks like, developing and understanding a sense of self-worth, and boundary setting related to all kinds of things, safety, needs, who you are.
Right.
Does that sound right?
Yes, that sounds right. And then there's one other very important aspect, and that is also understanding what triggers you. And I think we're going to discuss it later on, because a lot of times our triggers are a part of our history, or some people like to say our trauma, but we act on these triggers rather than on more concrete reality. And I think that is important to understand for basically anyone who deals with other humans.
Yeah. So understanding our triggers or traumas, and what does that mean? I mean, I think it's all interrelated as you're talking about this. So we're going to continue in just a moment with a few more definitions as we're laying the groundwork to how this applies to leadership development identity. We are nearing an ad break, so we're going to take that. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Ina Yeoman. This new season of The Hard Skills has actually moved to Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. So if you're listening live, hello, welcome. If you would like to join us online right now and ask questions in real time, you're welcome to. And you can also find us on LinkedIn or YouTube at talkradio.nyc. We'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mara Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 1 p.m. Eastern on Fridays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back. My guest is here with me, Ina Yeoman, and she, if you're watching live or watching the recording, was bouncing up and down, enjoying the music again. I'm going to have this as a requirement now for every guest who's on. All right. So we just got done talking through some definitions of what it takes to create a healthy relationship. And one last sort of set of definitions I'm curious about, if you can share a little bit more about what is emotionally focused therapy and what is strength theory. I know that you apply those to your relationship work. What do they look like?
Absolutely. So emotionally focused therapy and is there are two kinds. There is emotionally focused therapy and the emotionally focused individual therapy. And both therapies are rooted in attachment theory. One is for working with couples and families, and one is for working with individuals. So in a nutshell, emotionally focused therapy views how we see the world as something that is deeply rooted in our experiences, in how we form close connections. Frequently it's the family, but also sometimes other important people in our lives. And basically at the root of it, how safe we feel navigating the world and how lovable we feel with people around us very much drives a lot of factors, which I'm going to dive into later. But ability to take risks, ability to make mistakes are hugely important, and these are very much rooted in our experiences and how we've been conditioned. The reason why it's called emotionally focused is because emotionally focused therapy views emotions as signal for what is actually going on for you. What is the interpretation? Because many of us are very smart. We have like a huge intellectual cognitive layer, but underneath it, there are emotions which basically tell us you're safe, you're not safe. Right? You're small, you're big, right? And helping uncover those, helping connect to those really allows people to understand what is going on for them. And then with respect to strength theory was developed, it's very much at the core of positive psychology, which was developed by Martin Seligman. And interestingly, positive psychology, which is an umbrella over strength theory, was developed for dealing with sense of helplessness, depression, and anxiety. And it is doing something very unusual for our society. It, rather than asking what is wrong with you, it is actually asking what is right with you. And it sees our ability to function as humans divided into 24 different strengths. So it helps you to connect to those strengths, helps you to recognize those strengths, and navigate the world, knowing that you have tools, that you have these abilities, that you already have a toolbox to deal with many, many of the issues. And when people have that ability to know that they have the means, they can navigate the world in a very different fashion than somebody who feels disempowered.
Great. Thanks for helping to level the playing field in terms of knowledge when it comes to healthy relationships. What do they require, and what kind of therapy and coaching interventions might support healthy relationship building? Now, it might be obvious to us how this applies to leadership development identity, right? Leadership identity development. But I'm sure it's not obvious to a lot of people. So let's get into that. How do you see these things relate to the development of leadership identity from your perspective?
Right. It's a very good question. I view leadership as just one of the subsets of things we do and how we navigate the world. And I think that when, from the therapeutic perspective, a lot of times when people are navigating the world and taking complicated paths, all sorts of triggers come up for them, right? For example, you mentioned uncertainty a number of times, and dealing with uncertainty takes a lot of guts, takes an incredible perspective, takes composure, right? And all of these are much better, much easier achieved when you actually understand what is going on for you, what is coming up, where do you feel stressed, and then you can calibrate it, right? You can really truly say, well, this is a real risk, or this is something that I am dealing with because I have some sort of attachment history.
Yeah. And I love how you describe leadership as just one of the ways that we navigate the world. Because a lot of people think about this as like position, right? But you can be, I mean, I say this often, you can be a leader in any space, regardless of your role. It's how you show up. It's how you create an environment of thriving for others around you, right? That's simply what it is. But in order to do that, you really have to know yourself well and know what your triggers are, what's going to upset you, what's going to set you off, so that you're not causing harm to the people around you who you're actually trying to help thrive or help move in a certain direction, help the organization and things like that. So I'm sort of curious. Yeah, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, I was just saying, absolutely. You synthesized it so well. Yeah.
Thanks. So let's get real specific about some common challenges that we might see for leaders who might have trouble with things like attachment, safety, boundary setting, self-worth, the things that you mentioned. Like what does it look like? Where are they likely to sort of find themselves in a pitfall if they're not aware of these things about themselves?
Right. Well, these are great questions. And there are so many ways. So let's try to find the most interesting in the interest of time. Right. I think one of the ways in which attachment theory shows up is ability to take risks, as we mentioned already, and make mistakes, right? And it's very, very important to understand for a person to know and to be able to connect to what's coming up with them when they're thinking about risk, right? Where they conditioned not to take risks and thinking that risks are really horrible and risks are bad and they should be avoided at all costs? Or have they been kind of nurtured to perceive risks as something that, that it's the only way of adventure, just because they did not have a stable environment and the way they made sense of things, they would just basically thrive in risk and be incredibly bored in stability, right? So we can talk about that. We can also talk about ability to make mistakes, right? Ability to make mistakes and perfectionism are very much tied to how we were brought up, how we were able to explore, right? So if we were reprimanded every time we made a mistake and it didn't work out, right, then it will either condition us not to take risks at all, because not taking risks means not making mistakes, or being incredibly self-critical about, not doing well, or trying to control for too many things. And then also something that is very, very important to understand is that very rarely, I'm sure it's possible, but very rarely we talk differently to ourselves versus how we talk to others, right? So if we are very critical of ourselves, we will certainly be very critical of others, right? And it may show up in different ways, but and then there are some people who seem supportive of others, but critical of themselves. But there is still this difficulty of treating ourselves and humanity differently at the top level.
Yeah, all of these are excellent examples. My mind is racing with all of these examples. I'm just going to choose one for now, for the sake of time before the ad break. I'm interested in the making mistakes piece, because you talked about one end of the spectrum, which is fear of making mistakes leads to perfectionism. I also see the opposite end of this spectrum, which is what Patrick Lencioni says around the greatest challenge for leaders is overcoming their need for invulnerability, their need to demonstrate for themselves and other people that they know everything, they got it, they're strong, they're invulnerable. And I think that also keeps you from making good mistakes that are necessary for growth. I don't know, I'm curious to hear what you think about like that in the context of kind of attachment theory development.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, so from the attachment theory perspective, there's one of the ways you can create an attachment is a secure attachment, right? And a person who is securely attached feels lovable even when they make mistakes. So basically their self-worth is independent from their performance. And that's an incredible gift, because what happens is that these people are free to do whatever they want. They don't question whether this will impact, whether they're good or bad, right? And I think that is sort of the crystallization of positive vulnerability, right? Where you don't need to be perfect in order to be okay with yourself, right? And that unties your hands to so much freedom. You can explore, you can take risks, but at the same time, you can also say, you know what, I actually don't know everything, but I am willing to learn, right? Because I believe in myself. And at the same time, something else is that when you are, like when you're okay with making mistakes, you can also get unstuck when you see that your strategy is not working. And that is something I dealt with finance a lot, where you see that your strategy isn't working. You need to be able to pivot, right? And if you tie your identity to always being right, it's almost impossible to pivot, right? And
let's stop there. This is gold. Let's stop there for an ad break. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Ina Yeoman. We'll be right back in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest today, Ina Yeoman. We've been talking a lot about how the ideas around healthy relationships and attachment theory and strength-based theory all connect to leadership identity development. And some of those ways that we were talking about are around taking risks, how we sort of develop our relationship to risk-taking, minimizing mistakes or addressing how we feel about mistakes and how that ties our hands when we're not able to adjust in that way, how we speak to ourselves in critical ways or to others in critical ways, right? And as we were talking, a lot of people who listen to the show and know me know that I'm really interested and passionate about supporting women in leadership, and also, women with additional intersectional identities where it's very difficult to tease apart who you are at your core, the strengths that you have, separated out from the unhealthy gendered messages that we receive that then we internalize as part of ourselves when they're not really part of ourselves, and how to extract ourselves. And so one example is taking risks is a big one, right? Women are socialized not to take risks, and so are many people from marginalized backgrounds, because the moment that they take a risk and put themselves out there, the moment that they want to sort of show their authentic side or be vulnerable, they might be subject to negative judgments that are coming from, many inequities surrounding racism or sexism or things like that. And so in those situations, then how do you extract yourself from those negative messages and still find a way to show up, to take the risks necessary to develop, to grow, right? How do you still develop healthy relationships? How do you sort of enter into your own leadership identity, knowing that not all people will accept you for who you are in the way that you show up? Ina, I am curious to hear any thoughts that you have around this.
Absolutely. I think it's a very, very important question, and it's a very complicated question, right? Because if it was simple, we would have done it already 50 times, right? I think that it is very difficult to tease out that socialized, nurtured mindset, right? And the way to do this I think very slowly and very gently, is to really try to help people understand who they are and what they can do, right? Because I come from a generation where there were a lot of messages that women cannot do certain things, right? And I created a way of navigating the world. And I worked in investment banking. I worked for big insurance companies and in asset management. I created a way of navigating the world by being quote unquote nice, right? Mm-hmm. And I have to say that many of my colleagues were fantastic. I got a lot of support in my work. But the truth is that the way I internalized my role was probably self-limiting in many ways, right? And it took me a very long time to even start paying attention to it. Right?
What led you to know you're supposed to pay attention to it?
It's a good question. So for me, this whole area is a difficult area. I come from a family of multi-generational trauma. My mom is a Holocaust survivor. She was in the ghetto. My dad was also part of the, suffered from the Stalinist regime. So a lot of the messages that I was getting were, don't stick your head out. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
And speaking of risk, right. And at some point I came to realize, it just became clear to me that my take on risk is irrational. And I think that at some point I just somehow guessed that the way I see the world is probably not an accurate representation, right? And from there, I basically started to unravel what, how things actually are, right? And but it is something that I personally work on every day, just trying to understand what are my self-limiting beliefs. And I think that when it comes to my clients and women, I think it's important for them to understand what are the self-limiting beliefs, right? And it's difficult to navigate because a lot of things that we're good at, right, are sometimes not valued in the system where we work. So, for example, a lot of times emotional intelligence is not seen as a strong suit, while some other ways that are much more much more aligned with kind of like this alpha go-getter mentality are, right?
Yes, and it could be the opposite too. So sometimes what we are good at is not valued necessarily, right? So let's say supporting people in teams,
Right.
for bringing in revenue, for example, or creating a calm, healthy environment over taking massive culture change risks and going into like a merger and acquisition, or things like that.
Yeah.
Right. There are also times where the opposite is also the case, which is that sometimes women are good at being risk takers, aggressive, bold, and that is sometimes also shut down as aggressive, bossy, bitchy, whatever the label is, because people don't want to see or feel comfortable seeing women in those roles that are traditionally assigned to,
Right.
as masculine traits. And so then they feel like they need to tamp down that like good strength that they have, because that is also sometimes judged negatively, even when the trait itself is judged as a good trait in a quote unquote leader, like a traditional leader.
Absolutely.
Role, right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And sometimes it's almost a irreconcilable conundrum, right? Because they want you to be a strong leader, but a nice strong leader, right?
Right.
And then it just becomes impossible to navigate.
That's right. Yeah. So we the thing that I like to use, the term that I like to use, and it came out in 1992. Breaking the glass ceiling was the narrow band of acceptable behavior for women, and we still have that narrow band of acceptable behavior, right? Like you said, be bold but nice, or dominant but nice, or things like that. One thing that I do want to mention is this idea of self-limiting beliefs. When Ina says self-limiting beliefs, and we all have them, by the way, that we're working through, this is not something where we should be using it against women as a crutch, or something where like they need fixing, which is a real pet peeve of mine. It's that we have our own self-limiting beliefs because of the messages that we've received that are unhealthy or unhelpful to our ability to thrive. And we have to sort of identify those things and unlearn them and relearn what's important and helps us be our true selves or strengths, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting, I think you're right. I think women struggle with a lot of self-limiting beliefs in this world, in our world. But there is another aspect of it, and that is a lot of times we take the value system of our family or of our environment, and then we keep carrying it. And it takes a lot of open-mindedness and a lot of freedom to actually say, you know what, is this something that I want to continue with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, let's stop there before this next ad break. I think that's a great place to stop.
Sure.
You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and with our guest, Ina Yeoman. This is our new season, Tuesdays, 5 p.m. Eastern. Write it down, put it in your calendar. If you'd like to join us online and ask any questions, you still have a chance in this last section that we're nearing, and we'll be right back with our guest in just a moment.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies, from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on talkradio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic.
Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to our last segment here on the hard skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest, Ina Yeoman. And we're talking about the connection between knowing yourself well, knowing how to develop healthy relationships, and understanding where you stop and someone else starts, in order to understand what you're bringing to the table, to a relationship, to your leadership identity, in order to have the best impact and not escalate things as well. So we've been talking a lot about these concepts of trust, accountability, boundary setting, safety, how we learn things from, growing up, and how we start reconnecting with ourselves. And, I'm just wondering, as we're talking here, what are some steps that people can take in order to engage a little bit more around understanding themselves, developing a much more clear picture of their leadership identity development, and moving in a world in a much more kind of intentional way?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of times, I think it's important to notice your thought patterns, right? So, for example, when you start being afraid of making a mistake, right? Just notice that thought train, right? I am afraid to make a mistake because they will think I am stupid, and being stupid is bad, right? And then noticing the emotions that occur while this is happening. Understand where you feel it in your body, right? And over time, this practice will actually start helping you to gain a perspective that, right now, this moment, you're being triggered. Something is happening. And then you just basically have to pause and sit and think, is this something that is kind of my value systems that are being in play, or is that actually something that is going on with reality? And then another aspect of that I just want to bring up, because I think it's important, particularly as for people in leadership positions, it is very, very important to keep in mind that we are all subject to our cognitive biases, right? And understanding your cognitive biases is noticing them is very, very important, right? How do you set your performance metrics is important, rather than being part of the suffering from the confirmation bias or actor observer bias or sunk cost fallacy bias, right? Having paying attention to these things is extremely important, because it allows you to untangle what is actually going on. And I think that once you can create a clear view of quote unquote reality, it is much easier to make decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things are coming up for me. Number one, noticing your thought patterns and your emotions is actually not always easy. If you're finding yourself triggered, meaning you're having an extremely strong reaction, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling, sweaty, your stomach is like in the pit of your gut, and you may not be able to label that and why in the beginning. And so going to a therapist, going to a coach, asking your closest friends and people that you trust to talk through what just happened, why am I having this reaction, and slow you down enough for your frontal lobe to come back online to make sense of it is half the battle, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's so important to, you're absolutely right. It's very difficult to think creatively and and gain a perspective when you are actually triggered. But even noticing these things and paying attention to them, ideally without judging them, judging oneself in this difficult period, right, will help you understand that something has happened, right? And then you're right. I think that processing this with somebody who is supportive and somebody who can give you a perspective without this critical judgment is very, very helpful.
Yeah. Eventually, when you practice this enough, you can actually be your own observer, and you can catch yourself yelling at someone or having like a real rude response and then saying to yourself, why did I just do that? That was about me, or was that about you, or was that about some other thing that happened earlier on, right, that I'm taking it out on somebody else, right? But then you can self-correct quickly, like, I'm sorry, that wasn't about you. That was me working through something, like it just makes you a much stronger leader when you're this self-aware, right? The other thing that you mentioned is cognitive biases. Now, a lot of people do not know what their cognitive biases are. They think that their reality is the true reality, right? So let's just I'm just going to put a few things out there. Number one, transparency bias. That is when we think we're clear and we're actually not that clear with someone. Like we think it's obvious what we're saying makes sense, and then people don't actually feel like it makes sense at all. Another common one, naive realism, right? The belief that what we perceive is the true reality and everyone perceives it exactly the same way. Not true, people, not true. And then finally, confirmation bias, one of the most common ones, right, is if like, Dana and Olivia agree with me, but Ina and Jana don't agree, then Dana and Olivia are definitely right because they agree with me, and Ina's totally wrong because she disagrees with me.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So as we're closing out here, where can people find you?
The easiest way to find me is to go to my website. My website is nycrelationshipsplural.com. And they're welcome to write to me. And thank you.
Yes, I'm putting up her website right now for those who are listening later on and are not watching this. This is a beautiful website, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
What will they find there?
So you can find a little bit of information about me, my services, the page about polyamory and non-monogamy, as well as support groups that I'm running. But if anything that we discussed today resonates, I'm very, very happy to catch up with any of the people that were listening to the podcast and discuss, clarify anything that would be helpful. I feel like we touched a lot of very, very interesting topics, and there is so much more to explore. So
absolutely. What's one takeaway you want people to leave with based on everything that we've talked about so far?
I think one takeaway that is probably the hardest and is the most important is to understand that a lot of times we are dealing with a lot of personal issues, right? And in those personal issues, we start projecting threat and danger. And the truth is, a lot of times, this is not the case, right? And it helps us. It helps us to understand this so that we don't have a mudded strategy. We don't have. We are not confusing our personal triggers with what is actually going on. Very much.
Absolutely. I completely agree. That is a great takeaway. And audience, what did you take away? More importantly, what is one small change that you can implement this week based on what you learned from Ina? Share it with us on LinkedIn at Mira Brancu or Ina Yeoman and at talkradio.nyc so we could cheer you on. In addition to being a live show, remember we are now on iTunes and Spotify. Go subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, share with others to help increase our visibility, reach, and impact. Now, join us next Tuesday, the 31st, October 31st, when we are going to do a really, really special show, live coaching with the leader, Alyssa Hare. You do not want to miss this behind the scenes intimate coaching experience. Do show up. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to talkradio.nyc for hosting. I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, your host of the Hard Skills Show. Thank you for joining us today with our guest, Ina. Have a great rest of your day, wherever you're tuning in from.